Good morning. Can I have your attention, please? I'm Mitch Steenrod, and I'm past chair of the Knoxville Chamber, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here and welcome everyone this morning for the annual Governor's Breakfast. This is sponsored by Stowers Machinery Corporation. We greatly appreciate their willingness to support this. It's always a pleasure and honor to hear from the CEO of our state, and he is indeed a CEO. Makes it even more special that Governor Haslam is from Knoxville. We feel like we have an extra special connection to him. On behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to thank Governor Haslam for spending some of his very valuable time with us this morning. It's really important to recognize our elected officials that are here today, and I greatly appreciate their attendance. If you could hold your applause, for the sake of time after the introductions of those folks, I'd appreciate it. First, Congressman Jimmy Duncan, if all of you would stand when I say your name, that would be great. City of Knoxville Mayor Madeline Rajero, Knox County Mayor Tim Burchett. I think Farragut Mayor Ralph McGill's here. From our state legislature, Representative Ryan Haynes, Senator Becky Duncan Massey, Representative Harry Brooks, Senator Stacey Campfield, Representative Joe Armstrong, Representative Steve Hall, Representative Bill Dunn, and Representative Roger Kane. County Commissioners that are among us this morning: Brad Anders, R. Larry Smith, Richard Briggs, Amy Broyles, Mike Hammond, Sam McKenzie, Ed Schaus, Dave Wright, and Tony Norman. We've got several members of City Council, Knoxville City Council, with us this morning as well. Vice Mayor Nick Pavlis, Daniel Brown, Nick Delavolpe, Marshall Stair, Finbar Saunders, Dwayne Grieve, and Mark Campen. And finally, with education being very, very important to the country and specifically our state, we have several members of the Knox County School Board here this morning. I think Chairwoman Lynn Fugit's here, India Kincannon, Gloria Deathridge, Pam Traynor, and Karen Carson. I'd like to also recognize Superintendent Jim McIntyre and thank him for all the hard work that he does. Again, thank you for all your service, and thank you for what you do for the state and specifically Knox County and the city of Knoxville. I mentioned the gracious support of Stowers Machinery Corporation for supporting this event. There's also a couple other sponsors, and that would be Alcoa and Kramer Racing. Can representatives from Alcoa and Kramer Racing please stand so we can recognize you? Thank you very much for your support. We'd also like to recognize the gracious contribution of Bandit Lights and Sound Ventures for their production assistance today, and that would be from Michael Strickland. He's CEO of Bandit Lights. Big friend of the Chamber. We appreciate all you've done for the Chamber in the past, and you continue to do, Michael. Thank you. This is the fourth consecutive year that Stowers Machinery Corporation has been willing to sponsor and be the presenting sponsor of this event. Stowers has been tied to the progress, growth, and prosperity of East Tennessee since 1960, serving 38 counties of East Tennessee with sales, parts, and service for the entire Caterpillar line. Stowers corporate headquarters is located here in Knoxville, and they have full service branches in Chattanooga, Crossville, and the Tri-Cities. I know a governor who is focused on jobs will appreciate this, Governor Haslam. Stowers has grown from 70 employees in 1960 to more than 340 employees today, so congratulations, Wes, on that. They're a great example of a homegrown company making an impact on our region and the state of Tennessee through expansion and growth. At this time, I'm going to ask Wes Stowers to come up and present the governor.
Thank you, Mitch. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here once again to introduce Knoxville's very own citizen statesman, Governor Bill Haslam. Everyone in this room knows that Bill Haslam was not a career politician. He had a successful career in business and very recently was a two-term mayor here in Knoxville. Two highly successful terms where he restored our city's financial health, set a new standard of cooperation between city and county governments and the surrounding communities, and he made a lasting impact on the revitalization of downtown, which continues to this day. As a Knoxvillian, I'm so proud to see him making these transformational changes now on the state level for the entire state of Tennessee, most recently with the unveiling of the Tennessee Promise proposal during Monday night's State of the State address. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about this initiative during Governor Haslam's presentation. But he's also been able to do something during the last 3 years that very few elected officials today are able to do, and that's maintaining the public's confidence. Vanderbilt University's Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions released its 8th annual Vanderbilt poll in December, and Governor Haslam's approval rating is 61% amongst all Tennesseans and 76% amongst Republicans. You contrast that with what we see in Washington today, it's quite a contrast. I know that everyone in this room appreciates the governor's inspired leadership, and we are looking forward to his re-election in November and his second term in office so we can continue to do great things for the state of Tennessee. Please join me in welcoming our very own Governor, Bill Haslam.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks. Please have a seat. Thank you. Those poll numbers would be impressive, but I was talking to a guy from this part of the state who said, I never did trust anything that came out of Vanderbilt anyway. It would help me over there if we would beat them in football next year. It's a little hard living in Nashville at this point in time. It is really good to be here, and I'm incredibly grateful so many people would come out this morning for breakfast, and hopefully I can share some information that will be helpful and in terms of understanding where we are in the state and maybe how that impacts you and your business. It always makes me a tad nervous to walk into these big ballrooms that are set up like this. I flash back to one of my more awkward moments. I'd been governor for about 6 weeks, and the Adjutant General of the Tennessee National Guard called and said, hey, Governor, I need you to be at the Murfreesboro, one of the hotels down there, 2 Saturdays from now. And I said, General, I haven't had a day off in forever. My daughter is coming into town that week and bringing all of her friends from college, and I told them I'd spend the day with them. It gets kind of quiet, and he goes, the governor always comes to this. Now, I've since learned that anybody has an event, they always say, oh, the governor never misses this event. But when a general with 2 stars on his sleeve tells you that, you think, okay, well, I'll come. And so I come and I get there, and there's a little waiting room in the back that they're holding. Finally, a sergeant comes back there and gets me, and he says, Governor, you're up. And so we walk, and we're kind of standing at the back of a room it's probably 50% larger in this room, and it is filled in long rows of chairs with the men and women of the Tennessee Air and Army National Guard. And it's an incredibly impressive sight. Everybody's in uniform. Their battalion flags are flying at the end of every aisle. The battle streamers that show the different battles that unit has fought in history are attached there. And as I'm standing there, and this sergeant says, you stand right here, and so I'm standing right there. And then all of a sudden, this voice comes over the loudspeaker and says, Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Commander-in-Chief of the Tennessee National Guard. And the band starts playing, and everybody stands up and salutes, and I'm standing there going, this is really neat. And this sergeant goes, hey, buddy, that's you. Another one of those slight wake-up moments where Here's what I'd love to do this morning. This past Monday night, I presented the State of the State speech, and I won't ask for a show of hands for how many watched that. I'm just going to assume that you all were doing that. I would assume that, except after it was over, I emailed my own kids and said, what'd you think? And the response I got back was, think about what? So I'm pretty confident that you all are watching Jeopardy reruns or recruiting previews or something. So I'll try to give you what was a 35-minute talk. I'll try to shrink that down into 8 or 10 minutes to tell you what I said and why I said those things. The point I think of a State of the State speech is to really do two things. So number one, let the citizens, whether it be the city, the county, the state, know here's how things are going with this part of your government. And then second, here's my vision for where we need to go next. So if you're going to do that, I always start out with the budget because, unfortunately, the budget is the reality that drives everything. The city, county council members and county commission members and school board members can tell you there's a lot of things that people come to you in government and say, we would like to do this. And to be honest with you, there are a lot of good ideas. Government is more often deciding between two good things than it is deciding between something good and something bad. Our challenge sometimes is having to make those tough decisions. And so I think it always begins with the budget because the budget talks about the realities that you deal with. Anybody, okay, this table, this elected state representative and senator tables can't answer this, but anybody know what the total Tennessee state budget is? I heard something, somebody was close. $32.5 billion, okay? Anybody know what it was last year? 33. Wow, this is an educated crowd. Better make sure I have my numbers right. So we obviously are dealing with less money this year than last year. Most of that is federal money that has gone away from different programs. Some of that is due to the fact that our revenues aren't what we expected them to be this year. It's really a function of two things. The state brings in money in two ways. Sales tax, which is about at projections, and then business taxes, franchise and excise taxes that businesses pay. And because you represent that community, let me thank you. It's a crucial part of our economy. And those taxes are actually, though, paid on an estimated basis going forward. And last year, our franchise and excise taxes were out the roof, and we were thinking, boy, aren't we great managers? Our business revenue is double expectations in terms of percentage. This year, they've been below expectations to the tune of about $150 million, mainly because when those businesses made their estimated payments last year, when they came time to true them up this year, it showed they had actually paid more than they should have last year, so we owed them some refunds. So the net result of all that is business while it was good, wasn't quite as good as it looked last year, and while it's off, it's not off as much as it might look this year. One of the things that, and when you start diving down, you learn is there's 165,000 business units that pay taxes in Tennessee. But the top 1% of those businesses pay about 2/3 of all the tax payments. Those are usually big national or international companies that do business in Tennessee and lots of other places. So a change in their business, either a new product or a new way of distributing something, while not a big deal to them, can dramatically impact us. And that's a little of what we've seen with our revenue being off. We're encouraged that this is a blip and not a long-term issue. But because of that, out of that $32.5 billion budget, we had $260 million new dollars to work with, money that we didn't have last year. So when we go out to make the decisions, and Mayor O'Hara or Mayor Burchett can tell you the same thing, you start with a certain set of assumptions and you work from there. And that $260 million was the new money we had. So of that $260, we allocated $120 million of it to K-12 education. Now, we did that for a reason. because I don't think there's anything more important to what's happening in Tennessee than the changes happening in K-12 education. I understand there's a whole lot of controversy and a lot of discussion and debate, and a lot of that is really good because we're focusing on something that's the most important thing to the future of the state. The good news to me, is we're making incredible progress in Tennessee. Last fall, when the National Assessment of Education Profile came out, it's the nation's report card. It's the one test that is given in all 50 states. It's a test that you can't teach to because randomly selected students are pulled out to be a statistically significant sample for the study. And so teachers can't teach to that. It's the one true nation's report card. And last year, or this past fall, when it came out that Tennessee was the fastest improving state in the nation, that got some attention. It got the kind of attention that left the Commissioner of Education in New York saying, if we work really hard, we can be like Tennessee. Now, when's the last time you ever heard anybody from New York say that? Not only were we the fastest improving state, but we were the fastest improving state since they've been giving the test for the last 10 years. We have massive challenges and big issues in front of us, but the good news is we're making progress. To do that, we have to continue funding, and so we put, of the $260 million new dollars, we put $120 million new toward K-12 education. With a focus, one of my stated objectives is, while I'm in office, to have Tennessee be the state with the fastest improving teacher salaries in the nation. We ask so much more of our teachers than we used to. A lot of you have heard there's obviously a lot of discussion about teachers and the work requirements on them, and they are right. Teaching is a lot harder now than it was 10 years ago. We're asking way more of them, we're expecting more of students, and every day when the students walk through that schoolhouse door, they bring more societal problems, I think, than have ever walked through schoolhouse doors with kids in the past. And if you're a teacher and teaching every day, that's the reality you deal with. So we're committed to, while we treat them like a profession, to also begin to pay them like a profession. So that was a priority in our budget. Of the 260, 120 went to education. 180 went to TennCare, our Medicaid program. Medicaid is really the prime driver of our budget in the state. If you look at any budget, if you start to sit down and work on it, Medicaid is what drives everything else. Here's maybe my best example. Several years ago, Governor Bredesen was in office about 8 or 9 years ago, and he said, Medicaid is killing us. It's eating up every new dollar we have, and it had grown to be 35% of the total state budget. Governor Bredesen said, this won't work. Pretty soon, that's all we will be doing is Medicaid because it's crowding out higher ed, it's crowding out social services and everything else. We need to do something. And so he came in and tried to surgically fix the plan, to make changes that would control the cost. He wasn't able to because of regulations from HHS in Washington and because of prior consent agreements made with healthcare advocates. And so he was forced to cut the rolls, and he cut about 170,000 people from the rolls of Medicaid, an incredibly painful process. And some members of our legislature that are here now were there then, and they would say, we don't ever want to have to do that again. But he did it because he said, Medicaid needs to be 25% of our budget, not 35% of our budget. So after the cuts, it got down to being 25% of the budget. Today, that was in 2009 when it got to be 25% of the budget. Today, it has already grown back to be more than 30% of the budget. So the pressures of healthcare costs and education costs are like two walls of a building that keep squeezing the government's cost structure and forcing out the ability for us to do so many other things that we would like to do. So when we talk about managing the budget, it's primarily about managing those two things. In addition to the 120 to K-12 education, the 180 to health care, Medicaid, we also knew going in we had a $40 million increase for health insurance costs for our employees. So if you're doing the math there at your table, that's a negative 340 on an increase of 260. And obviously we were upside down before we started. Tennessee, thankfully, we have a balanced budget amendment. We have to balance it. So before we gave a raise or paid for an increased utility bill or made an improvement to a social service program for our most vulnerable citizens or did anything for higher education, we were upside down. So that necessitates, obviously, having to make budget cuts. That's the reality that we have to deal with. I hope and think that we made those in a thoughtful, strategic way. But there's no doubt that that's painful, but that's where we are and what we have to do to be able to fund the programs we want to fund. For us, our emphasis this year, again, was going to be on education because I think it's the biggest challenge. And so I spent most of my time during the State of the State speech talking about our challenges around education. You always begin with the end in mind, and the end is this. I spend a lot of time out selling Tennessee. Now, a lot of you in your business, whether you're a law firm or a manufacturer or retailer, you spend a whole lot of time selling your services. And when you sell your services, you know better than anybody what your strengths and weaknesses are. Because when you're selling, you get the pushback and you learn, okay, I can argue this really well. My argument here is not so good. And when you sell Tennessee, you learn really well what our strengths and weaknesses are. We have a lot going for us. You start with a good blessing of our physical location. We're well located to take care of a lot of the country. That helps. Number two, we have a really good work environment in terms of tax rates and right-to-work laws and other kind of work environment things that make this attractive. Number three, we have a really, really good work ethic here. And I hear that from everybody that moves in here. They're like, we love the people that we have to work with here. It is a great selection in terms of the spirit that they bring to their job. The complaint I hear every time is I'm incredibly concerned about the depth and the quality of the workforce. And I would add to that, I'm concerned that we have people trained for what the available jobs are, that there's a big skills gap for us. So if you start and say that's the big issue, you say, well, how do we begin to address that? Well, one of those ways that we've been talking about for a year is our drive to 55. Right now, 32% of Tennesseans have a degree or certificate beyond high school. The problem is that 10 years from now, 55% of the jobs available will require a degree or certificate, okay? So we've got to get to 55. That is a long way from where we are now. So we began with the thought of, what do we do to address that? Well, realize this, it doesn't just start when you get to college. We have to do a better job of preparing our students for post-secondary success. Right now, about 70% of our students who graduate from K-12 and go to community college need remedial work when they get there in math or English. The problem is if you take a math class, a remedial math class, there's only about a 10% chance that you'll actually graduate with a degree. And if you think about it, it's realistic. You're a 19-year-old, you're taking a class at a community college campus, and you're working hard, and all of a sudden it occurs to you, because this is a remedial class, it doesn't even count toward your hours. And pretty soon you get discouraged and you say, I'm just going to go get a job. It'll be easier. I'm never going to get a degree anyway. So we are proposing a program this year called SAILS, which identifies, let's move that remedial work back into high school, back into their high school senior year. We've been piloting the program down at Chattanooga State Community College. It's dramatically impacted the success rate of students who needed remedial work when they got to community college. We're also increasing the number of dual enrollment courses that are available, or we're not increasing them, we're increasing how much we pay for them. If a student takes a dual enrollment course, a college credit course while they're in high school, there's a 94% chance they'll go on to college. It's the reverse of needing a remedial class, right? If you take it while you're in high school, you're like, hey, I'm already ahead. I'm halfway through my freshman semester. And so 94% of those students go on to post-secondary work versus 60%. So we're saying that first dual enrollment course, we'll make that free for you, and we'll give you a discount for the ones that you take in addition to that. All about encouraging college attendance rate. Then once they get in, we're working really hard to get them out. We're implementing a program in our colleges called the Degree Compass program. How many of you have ordered something from Amazon, or you're on Pandora on your iPad or something, or Netflix, you buy Netflix? How many have done that, and you notice that after a while, they tend to know you better than you know yourself? They know what book you would want to read next before you know, or what movie you would like. We're building course guidance on the same principle. We have hundreds and thousands of transcripts of students, and then we have high school students coming in who have a track record and academic record. We have the ability to say, you know, I know you're really thinking, Mike Edwards, you're really thinking about being an engineer, but your track record would show you might do better in something else. And so rather than Mike going and being frustrated at some place he's not going to succeed, we help guide him to a place that he's much more likely to do well. And the reality is, all of us enjoy something more when we do well at it. And that program was started at Austin Peay State University several years ago, and it's again providing dramatic results at getting students through college once they get there. As we say, access isn't success until it means completion, and we are focused on the completion rate. We're also focusing on the almost 1 million Tennesseans who have some college credit but don't have a degree. It's a big challenge if we're going to get to 55%, we're not going to get there just by having every student that's K-12 graduate from high school and every one of those go on and get a degree. We've got to reach out to these adult Tennesseans who have some credit but not a degree. We're also funding a program called Prescriptive Analytics that lets the colleges and community colleges and universities go in and analyze their database of former students, again, who have some credit, but our history would show them, hey, this is a student that can complete if we can invite them back. And so we're asking our schools to go back and strategically target those adults and say, hey, Judy Smith, please come back. We think you have a realistic chance of graduating. But to do that, we also have to make it easier on those adults. If you're a 40-year-old single mother of two, you're probably already working 40 hours a week, and going back to school like most of us think about it is not realistic. And so we're adding alternatives like online competency-based education so that he or she really does have a realistic alternative to go back and get a degree. But the biggest part of the announcement, and the biggest thing that we work toward, is an idea that actually was born here in Knoxville several years ago, and it was first brought up in Out of True Confessions. When I first heard it, I thought it was a bad idea. But some people came with an idea called Knox Achieves, and it was started, I think at the time, from then Mayor Ragsdale's office, and Tim Williams and Randy Boyd and some others came up with this concept of what if we could go to every Knox County student and say, if you'll apply for college, you'll fill out the financial aid form, we'll guarantee you we'll pay the last dollar scholarship for you to go to community college totally free. And in doing so, we learned a lot of lessons. We learned that college attendance rates went up, I think about 15 or 16% here in Knox County. But the biggest thing we learned is that for a lot of people, it changed their perspective of what was possible. Families that never ever thought college was possible for them, all of a sudden realized they could say to their child, if you'll graduate from high school, you can go to 2 years of community college free. It felt like such a big game changer here. As soon as I became governor, I started thinking, how can we do this on a statewide basis? And so Monday, after really a year of work of trying to figure out how to make the math work and thinking through all the issues, we were able to announce the Tennessee Promise, which is a promise to every Tennessean from a newborn, born yesterday in Knox County to a soon-to-be high school senior, that you can have 2 years of community college totally free of tuition and fees in Tennessee. We'll be the only state in the nation that can make that promise. I think that's a huge promise for our future employers. I think that's a huge promise for our future employers. It's a huge promise to our families too. You know, I was after I gave that speech, we got some calls from national media, some New York-based folks, and after they got over the shock that it would actually be a southern state that would propose having 2 years of community college free, and making a few snide remarks about that. So I can't remember if it was maybe somebody from NPR or New York Times or someone, they said, well, But Governor, come on now. I've looked at the cost of community college, and it's not that much. And I've also looked at all the fees and at all the scholarships and grants that are available. And if a student will just apply for all those scholarships and grants, and the cost is so low, it doesn't really cost all that much to go to community college. So is this that big a deal? And I said, well, you just hit on it right there. The reality is it's not. Making up that gap is not near, the perceived gap is not nearly as big as the real gap. But our challenge, and like I said, we have a lot of professional educators here, and they'll tell you this, so many families never dream that school beyond high school is for them. Nobody in their family's ever done that. They've never even heard of a FAFSA form. And it certainly would, I've tried to fill one out. They're difficult. I don't care who, I'm working with a $32.5 billion budget. I'd rather do that than fill out a FAFSA form, okay? But you certainly don't know how the ACT test works, and you certainly don't know that it's given on that one date for you, and you better go take that. That's not an optional piece. And so we introduced the idea here in Knoxville of having mentors who take and work hand in hand with 4 or 5 students, helping them understand how they can fill out the FAFSA form and understand how the ACT test works, and calling them the week before class starts to make certain that they're ready to go, and calling them after school has started to encourage them along the way. I honestly think that if we do this, it can change the trajectory around workforce development in the state of Tennessee. We talk about that a lot, but you're always looking for something that really can make a difference. And I've been talking about all this with community college, but it applies to our technology colleges as well. And here's an incredible fact. Of our technology colleges, over 80% of the people who begin actually complete their degree there. And of those people, almost 90% of them get a job when they finish. That's an incredible success rate. And we have this jewel of a network of 27 technology colleges that, by the way, many of them are teaching the skills that are needed, that the ones that businesses are telling us that they need, whether it be welders or nurses or any of another number of different skill sets. It's our job as the leaders of the state to make sure we allocate the assets so that they have the training available so that they can get that job and they can fill that need for businesses. The businesses are no longer telling me, Governor Haslam, I love everything about Tennessee, but I'm just scared you won't have the workforce that we need. So if you ask why we're putting funds where we are in the budget, the way we're doing, if you ask why we're trying to open up education beyond high school, it's all around the idea of truly giving Tennesseans a better chance to have the life that we all want for our children or grandchildren. At the end of the day, let me say this. I'm incredibly proud of the test score improvement we're showing in Tennessee and the rankings and all that, but it's really not about any of that. At the end of the day, it's about all of us, have people in our family that hopefully are going to be here after we're gone, and we want to say to them that this world that we're helping to shape and mold, we've made it full of more opportunity for them than it would have been without these efforts. And that's why we do what we do. So with that, I'll stop. I think Mr. Edwards allocated some time for me to answer questions. Is that right? And so I will go until Mike or Rhonda, who really runs this show, tells me what to do to stop. Okay, their mic's coming, and I'll be Ed Schaus.
Thank you, Governor. Would you comment on the efforts to organize Volkswagen in Chattanooga?
I will. There's been a lot of people who said, well, as Governor, you've been very vocal about that issue. Is that appropriate? Why are you doing that? Well, 2 things to remember. The state of Tennessee has a huge investment in Volkswagen in Chattanooga. Former Governor Bredeson's administration put a very large package together of both direct grants and tax credits. And for the last year, we've been in ongoing discussions with Volkswagen about them adding another vehicle, an SUV that they're going to build somewhere. And so it's really come down to Chattanooga and Mexico. And we've been in intense negotiations with them keeping coming back to us really with 2 complaints. Number one, our cost per vehicle is still higher in Chattanooga than it is in Mexico. and you've got to do something to shrink that gap. Number two, you have to do something to bring more suppliers close to us so that our logistics costs get cut. And so we've been, like I said, this has been going on for a year. Been to Germany and back a couple times. They've been over. We spent a lot of time working on it. Volkswagen is very committed to the idea of adding a works council to their plant in Chattanooga. They have a works council at their, I think, 90 of their other 91 facilities around the world, and they're committed to that concept. Works councils work a little different than traditional labor unions do in the U.S. We don't really have any problem with them adding a works council. The issue is that the way the labor law works in the U.S., you can't have a works council without having representation by a union. In the state, we have a history of making investments. We've made a big investment in GM down at Spring Hill, and we've made a big investment in Nissan in Smyrna. Our investment in Nissan in Smyrna has quintupled in numbers of jobs and in the investment from what they said it originally would be. GM has had the opposite result. The plant has, ever since it was open, has dwindled in employment and in production as well. And so we actually have a history of what it looks like with investing into one plant that the UAW had a big presence in versus a plant that they did not have a presence in. And it's very real to us. And then we come back to Volkswagen saying, you've got to do something to lower our cost per car or we're not coming, and you've got to do something to cut the logistics supply chain costs for us by bringing more suppliers. Every supplier is saying to us, we're not going to come if the UAW comes there, and that will make our job much, much harder. Ultimately, my fear is that they won't be able, if they can't build the logistics chain they have there, they won't ultimately grow there. And if they don't grow there, it's pretty hard, if you talk to most auto manufacturers, to have a plant of that size that just produces one car. They just produce a Passat there. If a plant just produces that one product, it's hard long-term for that plant to make it, and the state has we have a really big financial investment in it. So it does come down, people say, well, you're just a Republican governor who's anti-union. I honestly don't think that's it. I'm a governor that is responsible for the stewardship of our state's tax dollars, and we have a big investment, and I'm really worried about the impact of that decision on the investment that the state has. And I realize everybody won't agree with me on that one, but that's why we do what we do. The vote, just for those who care, the vote is actually, the UAW will be voting down there this Wednesday through Friday, February 12th through the 14th. So we will know the result of that in about a week.
Governor?
Nick?
I guess this is on. You were talking a lot about dollars and shrinking dollars. Is there any projection of the change in the e-commerce and whether that's going to help the budget as we go forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no doubt that it's impacting us. We're a sales tax-driven state, and I bet if I asked for a show of hands, how many people bought something over the holiday season online, I bet I'm going to get about 100% participation in that. And depending on where you bought it, but most products bought online don't pay that 7% state sales tax or the 2.25% local tax. It is to think that that's not impacting both state and local government is totally wrong. And people say, well, I'm buying it on the internet. They're not a locally based business. Why should they pay the tax? Well, they're eventually delivering product over our roads, and that's how our citizens who are buying their products, that's how they receive their goods and services from the city and county. And oh, by the way, that hardware store that they might have bought it from, that local hardware store they might have bought that product from, they're paying that 7% tax, as well as property tax in our city and county. And it is a huge funding issue to state and local governments. So there is no question it's impacting our state revenue, and I would argue our local revenues as well. What could happen to address that? The good news is, of our total internet retail volume, we think about 11% of that is driven by Amazon. And as of 38 days ago, we made an agreement with them a year ago that as of 38 days ago, January 1st, they started agreeing to collect sales tax. Now, you all might not like that on your Amazon bill when it comes. There will now be, instead of oh, by the way, you're supposed to be paying Tennessee this amount, they will be charging you that amount. So if you want, you can blame that on me. But I hope you see the logic of why we have to, as more and more of our retail business goes online, state and local governments have a major problem. And not only that, but our local retailers who pay property tax and employ our citizens have a major problem. We've really created an unfair playing field. This isn't about taxing the internet. It's about collecting a tax that's always been due. The tax has always been due when you sell that, and it's supposed to be collected at the point of delivery. It just hasn't been enforced. What will happen on the rest of the 90 or 89% of the business? Congress has talked about passing a Marketplace Fairness Act. The problem we have is for them, if you're voting for it, they look, well, I'm having to vote for a tax increase and we're not getting the money. The sales tax money goes to state and local governments. So it's a difficult vote to make. Again, from where I am as a governor, it feels like it's something that has to happen, or state and local governments are not going to be able to fund the things that we have traditionally funded. Everybody's asking the hard questions. Anybody want to ask, like, how's my grandchild doing or anything? India. Okay, I'll come back, yeah.
How is your grandchild doing?
She's the most beautiful girl ever born.
Good, thank you. If you could just give us a status update on your conversations with HHS and the federal government on Medicaid expansion.
Sure. Like I said, these are all the good ones. But these are the right ones to ask. So I appreciate that. The question is about our discussions with HHS and the decision about expanding Medicaid. Just as a little bit of a rewind on that, so that you know what the discussion is. When Congress passed President Obama's Affordable Care Act, if you remember, it was immediately challenged in the Supreme Court. Is this legal? Is it legal to, the main thing that was challenged was the individual mandate, the mandate that people had to buy insurance. And that was challenged, and when the Supreme Court ruled a year and a half ago, it shocked everybody, not from so much how they ruled on the legality. They ruled that it was legal. But the surprise to everybody was when they said, what's not legal is the the federal government forcing states to expand who they cover. The law expanded Medicaid coverage to people, families that were at or below the 138% of federal poverty. So because states pay a portion of that cost, the Supreme Court said you can't force states to expand who they cover. And so that left states in the situation of having to decide, are we going to expand to cover more people or not? For a lot of people, this is the easiest decision in the world. We're going to give more people health care that don't have it. That feels like that's as basic of a good idea as there could be. You add to that the fact that initially the federal government's going to pay 100% of it, and they'll work their way down to 90% after 3 years. And we have some hospitals, some healthcare providers who are losing the payments that they get for taking care of indigent patients. It's called DISH payments. That feels like a really no-brainer. And that, like I said, a whole lot of people feel that way, and I've received a lot of advice to that effect. But from where I stand, there are three issues. The first one is back to the very first budget reality I brought up. There is a financial reality. Medicaid continues to eat up more and more of our budget. Right now, it's 30%, and it will go higher. And even though the federal government is going to, they're saying they'll pay at a minimum 90%, that's still 10% that's going to come from somewhere. And so we would have to make the decision, where do you want the 10% to come from? Do you want it to come from teacher salaries? Do you want it to come from higher ed funding? Do you want it to come from Department of Children's Services? But it's going to come from somewhere. In Tennessee, we don't have an income tax, and we're not going to have one anytime in the foreseeable future. We have a sales tax that is about the highest in the country, and our business taxes, even though we say we're a very low tax state, our business taxes are actually in the medium range. So there's not going to be a tax increase anytime in Tennessee soon. We're working with the budget we have to work. We have a real financial issue in expanding that. I think there's also some legitimate question that at some point in time, Congress comes to the decision we really are going to address the fact that we're spending way more than we're bringing in. And I personally believe when they do that, the idea that we're going to, for some people, pay 90% of the cost of Medicaid. For traditional Medicaid patients, they pay 2/3 and we pay 1/3. But that they're going to leave this group, that they're going to cover at 90%, I think is a fair question eventually when the budget deficit gets addressed. So you start with some financial concerns. My second concerns are more philosophical. I think the U.S. needed health care reform. I really, really do. I think this president had a chance to have historical health care reform when he came into office. I think instead what we got was a plan that expanded coverage but did nothing to address health care costs. We have a system, and I'll compare this. My predecessor, Governor Bredesen, used this to describe our current system. It's like we all went to the grocery store and went shopping. When we walked in the front door, we were met by an assistant manager, and the manager walked through the store helping us, showing us additional products that we might need to buy because they were obviously getting paid for that. And as we got to the cash register, after the helpful assistance of the assistant manager, we waved and nodded at the cash register and walked out the front door. Now, nobody can say that that's the right way to pay for any product where there's no user engagement in the product itself. I think we'd be way better off to have a system that actually had user engagement as well as provider engagement in having better health outcomes and controlling healthcare costs. The provider community is on its way there. They're working hard to come up with innovative ways to change how we pay for medicine. And most people in the medical community would tell you 10 years from now, how you pay for medicine will look dramatically different. Everything won't be a fee for service. You'll be paying more on a per operation basis or per procedure basis. But on the user side, we have to have some engagement if we're going to control healthcare costs, and our budget is the perfect example. We can keep growing Medicaid, but something has to go. So I have a philosophical issue just with, isn't this the right time to try to fix a plan? And that's why I propose that. I've had that face-to-face conversation with President Obama, and he said, I agree with you. Let's see what we can work out. But when we go to HHS and try to work it out, we keep running into some kind of basic issues that we can't get past. I think it's still worth working on. There are some folks who say, just give up. But I think it's important enough to try to keep working on something that would give more people health care coverage and more preventative care, more health care screenings, all those things that will end up in better outcomes. So I'm committed to continuing to work on it. The third issue is, quite frankly, is a political one. Right now, if we propose something, there's a lot of there'd be a whole lot of strong questions coming out of the legislature, and the thought that we're just going to go make an agreement with HHS and then get something approved real easily in Nashville is not realistic either. And so I'm trying to my commitment to the legislature is not to bring them something that I don't think, that I wouldn't recommend that they pass. And my challenge is finding something I can get approved in Washington and passed in Nashville, and that's a really, really tricky challenge. Again, I think it's important enough to keep working on, and we'll keep doing that. Set? I'm getting one wave back there, and then it looks like I'm getting the hook here. Yeah.
Good morning, Governor. I was wondering, how do you think that this education prospect will affect the four-year small colleges that are struggling now with their enrollment? If you have two-year colleges that are free, will it affect those? Will you be able to do colleges that are associate degrees? Any college that's associate degree? There's a network. I know you're talking about our small public schools or our independent schools. Colleges.
Right, but our private colleges or public colleges, because there's a little different situation.
Public colleges.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks. Okay. Well, a couple points. I think it's a realistic concern. It's one that we talked a lot about. ultimately, I think this, I think there's a challenge to our public schools, to our public four-year schools, to differentiate the product that they have, to say, here's what we can offer as a four-year school that might not be available in a community college, because they do have different missions, and I think we're seeing a renewed understanding and willingness to go be aggressive about bringing students in. The second point I would make is this: we're vastly increasing the pipeline of students coming into the system, into two-year schools. And then when those students graduate from community college, they now are going to have $5,000 per semester to go on to finish their junior and senior years. So you have students who had 2 years free, and now they've got $5,000 per semester if they keep their Hope Scholarship, in addition to what other financial aid they get. I think we'll increase that the pipeline of people that will attend our four-year schools as well in the end. All right, I think I better go. Thank you all. Indy, I said, Indy, do you have a question you could say? Because I said I'd come back. Right, so since India didn't have Mike, I'll repeat the question. Our achievement rates are going up fastest in the country. I've made a commitment to have teacher pay increase the most while I'm in office, to have the fastest percentage increase. I will say this: overall in education funding, since we've been in office, Tennessee has the fourth highest increase of any of the 50 states. So we haven't just been talking about this, we've actually been doing it. This year, we're putting, I think $67 million is going toward increased teacher pay in Tennessee. And while we're not improving as much as we'd like, the teacher pay is going up 2% this year versus 1% for the rest of state employees. So in a tough budget year, we're still putting a priority on increasing teacher pay. Thank you all very much for letting me have the chance to be here.
Governor, we greatly appreciate you attending this morning, and we sincerely appreciate the efforts that you've put forth to grow business and expand business in Tennessee. But most importantly, we stand beside you, right with you, on the education efforts that you've got going on in the state, and we greatly appreciate your focus and attention to that. Wes, I'd like to thank Stowers Machinery Corporation for their fourth sponsorship of this great event. I'd like to thank Alcoa and Kramer Racing for their sponsorship this morning. Governor, I'm sorry to tell you, the reason everybody's here, though, is for the book in the center of the table. They didn't come to see you. So somebody at each table, if you look under your chair, there should be a tag or something that if you get the lucky tag, you get the book, okay? We greatly appreciate you attending. Everybody have a great rest of your Friday and have a great weekend. Thank you.